Warning: viewer discretion is advised. Hi friends, welcome to Meals 10 Alive For, where we talk about a true crime case and make a death row meal from scratch. I'm your host Jody Breton, and if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. So I'll just get right into it. Today we're covering another serial killer, and the first time he unalived somebody was when he was 8 years old. I know, super crazy. So his name is Carroll Cole. Have you guys heard of him? I honestly don't know why he's not a more well-known serial killer or case because so many crazy things happen. So anyway, Carroll is born May 9th, 1938 in Sioux City, Iowa. Carroll has two siblings, an older brother and a younger sister. His parents were Laverne Cole and Vesta Cole. And yes, I'm going to be referring to him as Carroll this entire time because he hated his first name, so I figured I would do something that he absolutely can't stand, just in honor of him and the terrible things that he's done. So shortly after Carol's sister was born, the family moves to Richmond, California, and after they move across the country, Carol's father starts working at a shipyard, and shortly after that, he was drafted in 1939. So almost immediately after Laverne is drafted and out of the home, Carol's mother starts many affairs with many different men. And Vesta really didn't try to hide any of this from any of her children. At one point, Vesta took 5-year-old Carroll to an unfamiliar apartment. She left him alone to go have sex with a man in the master bedroom, and when they got home after, Vesta beat him and threatened him so he wouldn't tell anyone of her adultery. This wasn't an isolated incident either. Vesta regularly took Carroll with her on these outings, and it really seemed to damage Carroll and really skew his perception of women altogether. Carroll was also bullied a lot in school since he had a traditionally feminine name. It also didn't help that Vesta would punish Carroll by making him wear dresses while serving coffee to guests and called him Mama's little girl. Again, all of this made Carroll really hate femininity and women in general, especially women who drank or came off as promiscuous at all. In the spring of 1945, Carroll's father returned from the front lines, but Carroll felt guilty about the secrets that he kept for Vesta. He ended up looking down on his father for how much he catered to his mother and how oblivious he was to all of her adultery. He'd later say, and I quote, "To me, he just wasn't a man." By the summer of 1946, 8-year-old Cole had a lot of pent-up rage. One day, some kids invited him to go to the swimming hole. On this afternoon, another boy named Dwayne started bullying Carroll about his name. The boys got into a fight, and they were soon separated. Carroll bided his time all day at the harbor, and when Dwayne jumped in for the last time, he held on to the other boy under the water, drowning him. Carroll said he felt no remorse, but he was afraid of getting caught. Days later, when Dwayne's body was found, police ruled it an accident. Also, could you imagine being this boy's parents and thinking that your child died of a tragic accident, and then 30 years later finding out that he was actually murdered? I would be devastated all over again, that's for sure. My heart really goes out to those parents. So soon after he drowns Dwayne, Carroll wanted to kill another boy named Jimmy Whitney, but he never found the right moment. In the middle of 8th grade, Carroll was expelled for hitting another student, but lucky for him, they were already in the process of moving. So Carroll saw this as an opportunity to start over. He started going by his middle name Eddie, he made friends, and even started dating. At 16, Carroll and another kid broke into a liquor store. They were caught, and he spent 2 weeks in a juvenile detention center. Over the next few years, he would get arrested over many small things like drinking, breaking curfew, and stealing. On Carroll's 18th birthday, he drops out of school and he decides to join the Navy. 9 months later, he was moved to the base in San Diego. Within his first year, he was arrested by military officers for stealing guns. He spent 90 days in the brig and was dishonorably discharged. The rest of the 1950s, Carroll was in and out of jail for petty crimes like theft and driving without a license. On June 1st, 1960, Carroll comes across a couple making out in a car. He smashes the back window with a hammer and tries to attack the couple, but the man gets the hammer away from Carroll, and so he flees the scene. The very next day, police show up at Carroll's house, and he's arrested for the assault, but he only spends 30 days in prison for this. At this point, Carroll said that his fantasies were getting much more vivid, so on January of 1961, he flags down a patrol car and admitted that he was constantly thinking of harming women and asked for help. So Carroll ends up checking himself into a mental health facility in Napa, where he was assessed by a team of doctors. Doctors were baffled by Carroll. They concluded that he had schizophrenia, although he really didn't show the typical symptoms, and that he had sadistic abnormal sexual tendencies and was definitely a potential danger to the public. They didn't feel Carroll was mentally ill and hadn't done anything, so they released him. Their logic was that since Carroll sought help when he was having these fantasies, that he wasn't a true danger. In the fall of 1963, Carroll goes to Dallas, Texas, where he met a woman in a bar and unsuccessfully tries to strangle her. Carroll fled, and the police did not find him for this offense, so he never faced any jail time for it. Soon after, in a Dallas bar, Carroll meets Neville Whitworth, who also goes by Billy. Within a couple months, they ended up marrying each other, but it wasn't a positive relationship. In addition to being a bartender, Billy was also a sex worker, and she was an alcoholic. According to Carroll, she also abused her young daughter, and she really embodied everything that he hated about his mother. Their relationship was very toxic, violent, and after a year and a half, things came to a head when he accused Billy of cheating on him. As a result, Carroll set fire to the motel he thought Billy had an affair at. Police did arrest Carroll for this offense, and he spent 9 months in a Texas prison and was released January 1967. After being released, he drifted around and eventually landed in Missouri. Carroll got drunk one night, and he said he needed a place to sleep, so he broke into an apartment. In the apartment, he saw an 11-year-old girl, and without hesitating, he began to strangle her, but she screamed, so he fled the scene. Officers did track him down and arrested him. Carroll ended up taking a plea bargain for the assault with intent to kill. In exchange, he received a sentence of 5 years, but only served half of that. Also, this is just my opinion, but why are the sentences so short if they just attempted to kill someone? Like, it's not my fault that you sucked. You still tried to kill somebody. Anyways, he was paroled in the spring of 1974, then headed to Reno, Nevada. While in Nevada, he attempted to strangle 2 women, both of whom escaped. Carroll once again turned himself into the authorities in the summer of 1970. He told them that he was obsessed with the thought of murdering women. Police had him committed to a psychiatric hospital, but he still didn't get help. Psychiatric social worker Richard Watson concluded that Carroll was a liar who got himself committed, so he had a place to stay. A few weeks later, he was once again released, and they put him on a bus back to California. Carroll said that after this, he just said to hell with it on getting help or really suppressing his urges. In the spring of 1971, he went to a bar in San Diego. He started a conversation with Essie Buck. After drinking together for a while, they left and went to a secluded area where he strangled Essie to death. He put her body in the trunk of his car, then dumped her body in a remote field the very next day. A boy riding his bike found her body, and strangely enough, the coroner couldn't determine the cause of death since she had no visible injuries despite being strangled. Witnesses saw Essie leave with Carroll, but no one knew his name and police couldn't track him down, so as a result, the case went cold. A couple weeks after killing Essie, he met another woman in a bar named Wilma. They left together and once again took her to the outskirts of town and strangled her to death in the passenger seat. This time, however, he buried Wilma's body in the desert next to the Mexican border. A week after Wilma was murdered, Carroll murdered a third woman and buried her in the desert. We don't know her name, just that she was in her early 30s. In June of 1971, police arrested Carroll for driving under the influence and he went to prison for a year. Immediately after his release, he went back to killing. In the spring of 1972, he picked up 2 women in a bar in San Isidro. He again drove them to a remote location, strangled one, and bludgeoned the other to death. Their identities are unknown, and unfortunately, their bodies were never found. Later, Carroll met Diana Pichal while she was bartending in a San Diego bar. They quickly started a relationship and moved in together. They were both unfaithful and toxic, just like Carroll's last relationship. This didn't stop Carroll from proposing, and they married a year after they met. During his marriage, he ceased killing, but the marriage ended although neither filed for divorce. Carroll then drove aimlessly and ended up in Wyoming, where he met 43-year-old Marlene Havner at a bar. They left the bar together, where he strangled her in his car and dumped her on a hillside. The next 2 years, he was in and out of prison between California and Nevada for petty crimes. Sometime in between, he took his 7th victim, a Las Vegas sex worker named Kathleen Blum. He left her body in an unfenced backyard, and the police found her body on May 14th, 1977. After this, Carroll drove to Oklahoma City, and this is where he said he really started to spiral. November 23rd, 1977, he again met a woman at a bar and took her home. When he woke up the next morning, Carroll found that he had unalived her. Only this time, she was dead in his bathtub with some of her body parts in the fridge and some on a skillet on the stove. Carroll said that he had no recollection of doing any of it and was less freaked out about the dismemberment than blacking out. Carroll then put her remains in a garbage bag and dumped them all over the city. His next murder would be in August 1979 when he strangled 39-year-old sex worker Bonnie Sue in San Diego, California. Carroll left her body in an alley behind an appliance store. On September 19th, he got back in touch with Diana, who is still technically his wife. They had sex and he strangled her to death, wrapped her body in a blanket, and put her in one of her closets. Carroll had skipped town, but the coroner ruled that Diana died of alcohol poisoning and there was no foul play. This part made me so mad because how would she have died from alcohol poisoning? She was wrapped up and stuck in a closet. Like, she didn't die from alcohol poisoning. It made me so mad. He then went to Las Vegas, where he killed 51-year-old Marie Cushman after picking her up at a bar. This time, he left her body in a hotel room, where a maid discovered her body the next day. Another year later, in November 1980, Carroll returned to Dallas, Texas. Within 1 week, he killed 52-year-old Dorothy King and 32-year-old Wanda Faye Roberts, both of whom he picked up at a bar. At this point, his body count is at 13 if you've been counting, and as it continued to grow, he seemed to get more and more sloppy. He left Wanda's body in her apartment, and then he dumped Dorothy in a parking lot. On November 30th, he started talking to Sally Thompson. They went back to her place, and he strangled her to death. Before he could deal with her body, there was a knock at the door, and Carroll answered it. It was Sally's 2 sons there for a visit. He let them in and made no effort to hide Sally. Her sons called the cops, and Carroll was questioned. Carroll said that Sally had collapsed a couple minutes before and he had been trying to revive her. The coroner ruled Sally's death as undetermined and guessed that she died of alcohol poisoning. The police released him, but another detective looked at the case and was very suspicious of him. They brought Carroll back for questioning, and he quickly folded. He then confessed to 9 murders in total. This part was so crazy to me because he had had such dumb luck this entire time, and if he hadn't confessed to those murders and had just stuck to his story, he probably would have still been walking free. Texas sentenced him to life in prison there, and then he was extradited to Nevada to answer for the 2 murders he had committed, and he was sentenced to death in 1984. Carroll refused to appeal the decision and even wrote an essay which was published in the Reno Gazette on why he should be executed. Carroll Cole was put to death December 7th, 1985. In an interview shortly before he was executed, he said, "There is absolutely nothing good about me. It's too late for me and for the many victims. I just want to get it over with." Carroll's last meal was jumbo fried shrimp, French fries, salad with French dressing, and Boston clam chowder. I did like this last meal. It was a little bit different, which I can appreciate. So I would give this one a 7 out of 10. That was such a roller coaster today. Let me know what you guys thought about this case in the comments and how crazy it was. I personally could not believe how many times he went to go get help and really didn't receive it. And then on top of that, how lucky he was. But anyway, guys, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Please like, subscribe, and all of that other good stuff. And I will see you guys hopefully on the dissection sometimes this week. If not, I will see you next Tuesday. Thanks, guys. Bye.